So welcome to the Node.js N-API Team meeting for September 6, 2018. As usual, we're going to go through our milestones and sort of see where we're at. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Oops, wait a sec. I'm going to promote Gabriel. There we go. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen with the current milestone, hopefully. There we go. So SQLite N-API port resolved Mac issues. So sorry, I don't have an update since last week. I haven't managed to catch up with Anisha yet. Investigate use of pre-build with N-API.
All right, so I have a PR outstanding on that. It's two separate projects, as it turns out, pre-build and pre-build install. I have common code to support N-API between the two projects that I duplicated. And so the maintainer is asking that I put that into a common module. So I'm working on getting that code published into a common module so that it's not duplicated between those two. So,
okay, so that'll be a module that you publish that then
correct.
Those two depend on.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then other tool builders could use that if necessary.
Okay, how much code is in that module?
Not much. It's probably a dozen functions, so
okay.
not much. Well,
still, a dozen is more than a couple lines. So
yeah, true.
Sounds good. Okay, that's good. The other two things we have is to burn down the list of the repo issues, node repo, and burn down list of issues raised by module owners. Anything that we should talk about this week on that front? I think, Gabriel, you've submitted a pull request to get the missing function back into 6.x, right?
Yep.
I saw you had to make a case, but you managed to make the case, so that was good.
Yeah. And Anna supported me, so that was even better.
Yep.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get this straightened out. And now I'm helping explain the meaning of the different parameters of the thread safe function.
Okay.
And I provided examples for two folks who were looking to use thread safe function. One of them was in conjunction with async work, how to call out of execute using a thread safe function.
Yep.
And the other one was this round trip asynchronous call. And that, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know whether that should result in an API addition or modification or not. We talked about it some more at length as to whether we should do that. We'll see what this person says in response to the example, because I'd really not want to add that. But on the other hand, I did have to use an extra mutex for the round trip asynchronous call, because the object which you pass into JavaScript and then you get back, you have to access it through a mutex, because meanwhile the thread is checking whether the call was answered or not. So yeah, if we want to limit use of libuv so as to prevent ABI breaks, then we may want to wrap that particular use case, where you have something coming in from a thread, going into JavaScript, coming back at a later time, and then being checked from the thread to see whether it's resolved or not.
It may be worthwhile, because if you had to use a libuv piece to do it, that doesn't sound good.
Well, yes, I mean, you can use whatever you want, right? Because the point of a thread safe function is that there's already a threading implementation.
Sure.
that you wish to sort of meld in.
Right. You're not starting your own thread anyway. Okay. Yeah. Good
exactly.
point.
Yeah. So we already have that, and so presumably people are working with mutexes.
Yep.
But then again, this other person is using a C library that does all its own threading, and it's behind closed doors, so to speak. So they don't control the threading, but presumably they have hooks for functions which can run either on one thread or another, and then they can that's where they can hook into it and go an API. And so then presumably that C library would not expose the primitives that it itself uses for the threading synchronization. So then, if they have to reach for synchronization primitives, additional ones, then maybe reaching for libuv would not be a good idea. But I don't know. I would say we should be conservative about this, and let's see what these folks say. And
Sure.
if the need becomes more pressing, then we can start thinking about adding stuff.
Yep.
Or supporting even more multi-threaded stuff. So
no, agreed. Better to be conservative for sure.
Yeah. So that's where that's it. Because I think I'm seeing like thread safe usage on like 3 different fronts now.
Mm-hmm.
So it is being used. It's just people are trying to figure out how to use it and how to use it properly and so forth.
Well, that's good that people are doing that. That's what we want while it's experimental. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this also, we should also tally this up as like real world usage.
Yeah. So basically, if you at some point we'll want to say, well, this should become non-experimental, and having those as the different things as backing it makes sense.
Yeah, and as a segue into this becoming non-experimental thing, we have to figure out how to do this, because my impression from trying to backport to 6.x this stuff which was missing, is that we may have a very limited window to mark things as non-experimental, because if we have things marked as experimental in the 3 supported versions of Node, then we have a very limited window to massage the header file and move things from experimental to like some version.
But I wasn't really sure that things would get backported. Like, I don't think we'll be successful in getting things that are marked as experimental backported to 6.
No. But what I'm saying is the things that are experimental now, that will end up being backported de facto by virtue of the fact that versions move forward. And eventually 10 will take the place of 6.
Yes.
Then how much of a window do we have for shuffling the header file so that those things are no longer experimental? Like LTS is a moment in time, when that's it. It enters maintenance mode from one moment to the next.
Right. So, but I think the things, like, it'll be that when we promote them, you basically get a new N-API version. Right. And then at that point, it's basically, okay, well, if there's a new N-API version, that may, probably back to current, no problem. And probably back to the most recent LTS, it's probably okay. Beyond that, I'm not sure we should be hoping there's much.
Right. Okay. So if somebody built,
I mean, it's not ideal, but that's, I think, the real reality.
Yeah. So if somebody builds against such an N-API version that is only available in current and LTS, but happens to be perfectly available in maintenance, except marked as experimental, then they will still be ABI compatible with maintenance. They will just happen to be ABI compatible with maintenance.
Yeah, they could basically say, well, right. They would happen. Yeah, just because something claims 3 doesn't mean it doesn't have some things from, say, 4, right?
Yeah, exactly, because they are marked experimental.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. So then I guess
that would be, but it's sort of like, if that happens, then I guess you can kind of count on, you can make things work. Otherwise not, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's no more guarantee there.
Yeah.
Well, okay. All right. So that's good.
There's only so much we can do on that front, right? Like, we can get stuff, we can say, okay, we can try and get it back a couple releases, but getting it back into the one that's fixed is always
if things were experimental and they've stayed experimental for so long that they are now even present in maintenance using identical signatures.
Yep.
Then claiming that the new version of N-API is now available across all Node releases is as simple as creating a PR against the maintenance release, which merely changes the node API.h. It doesn't actually add code, nor does it remove code.
But that Anna was proposing
that maybe we should change our LTS policy to allow such changes.
Right.
Because they don't actually change the code base. They just
Yep.
mark things as not experimental anymore.
Yeah, that's worth considering.
Yeah, exactly. Because then we can claim, okay, an API version 4 is now available on all versions of Node, and it's non-experimental.
Right.
So I don't know but on the other hand, it is a non-trivial modification of the code base, even if it's just a header file.
Yep.
So those are the two sides of that coin. But anyway, yeah, this is something we can talk about like more widely as things come along. But I'm happy this thing has landed.
Right. I mean, I guess that would come back to we have the stub. Is there any way we can have like add-ons for older ones? I don't know. I'm not sure that helps. So no, I don't think we want to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it will diminish over time as it gets more and more complete.
Yeah.
But we'll have to figure out what we can in fact do, and because at least in this case, you're right. The experimental ones will all be there. Hopefully, if we backport them for 8 and then 6. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe it'll smooth itself out, especially if we consider experimental to be very, very sort of conservative and not allow modifications easily, even though it's experimental.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we should only really change it if we really need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's it on the modules front, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to hopefully get some time this afternoon to land a few things in Node.js N-API and do some reviews. So hopefully push a few of those forward. Documentation push, I think I'd seen definitely, Nicola, that you had created at least one new one I haven't had a chance to look at yet, but...
Hi, Michael. Yes, I ended writing the object wrap documentation, and I have a pull request on Node.js API repo. So now it's all complete, I think, and we need to remove unnecessary comments on all documentation, and add the N-API, the complete N-API namespace everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So where is that? Okay, so this is function. So this one.
Function and function reference, and then there is another PR with first pass over object wrap documentation.
Right. So this one, I guess, Gabriel, you were suggesting we suggest a namespace. Are you okay if this lands and then we do that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just as long as eventually we have consistency as to always using namespace or not, and I think we agreed to use namespace, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd say I'll go ahead and land this one. If you want to go in and throw in your okay. And then it sounds like Nicola is going to plan a pass to fix up the namespace.
Yep.
Okay, and then the other one was object. Where was that one?
First pass.
This one, yeah.
Here I need the review.
Okay. So yeah, I'll try and take a cut at looking through it today. Anybody else can do that as well. That would be good so that we could get that landed.
There we go.
Okay.
Because it'd be great to. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to work on remove all the comments about that the documentation is under development. So I can do this for all documentation parts in this weekend. And I add namespace consistently over on all documentation. Okay. So these are the final task. I think.
Sounds good. So okay, we'll try and get those landed, and then yeah, you're volunteering to do that last bit, and that'd be great. So let's switch over to Milestone. That's interesting. This is milestone 7. I guess there's maybe an offset.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we don't have too many. We should start creating issues there. I'm gonna create matrix of tested methods. And I want that to be okay, so milestone 11. That one's just they're one of the interns within our team is creating, like, looking at all the methods and saying which is going to identify which ones are tested and which ones aren't, so we can focus on filling in ones where we don't have testing. Async worker. This is really not looking very nice here, is it? Is there any way to make that better? Maybe I'm going to say milestone overview. Okay, so this one, I think, if anything, maybe we should plan. Can we ask everybody to read through those issues, and then next week we'll make that the focus of the meeting to go through? Does that make sense?
Okay.
Just as because we got to figure out how to, like, there's been the suggestion that we should focus on that and figure out what needs to change or not, and we probably just need to agree on what steps to do that.
You mean the issues in Node add-on API related to async worker?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we want to get up to speed enough to be able to think about them, discuss them, and then next week plan to go through them and figure out what our way forward is going to be. Current burning down issues, yes. Prepare presentation for JS Interactive. So yep, I sent email and Runish just to say, let's get going. Birds of a feather in the community corner. The Collaborator Summit. That's one where, did we submit anything?
I don't believe in the end we did.
So do we still want to do that? The schedule's being finalized today, I think. It may even be overlapping with this session, but I think we could still request a slot if we wanted to.
Okay.
Or do we think we've, the birds of the feather is enough?
I was thinking of the birds of the feather as evangelization.
Yep.
And then this breakout session as a way to recruit
right.
developers for an API itself.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna, if we're all agreed, I will say if it's still possible, the N. Cover node code with node cover. Okay. So I will paste that in there and we'll see if we can still do that.
Okay, great.
Because, yeah, I mean, I think we could walk through the code, even if we did that ad hoc, walk through the code,
right,
show where things are, and then talk about how to get contributed. Yeah, I think, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got that in there. I did mention it that somebody at the TSC meet had sort of listed the ones that were there. I said, well, I think the N-API team may want to do something. So
okay,
there, we'll throw that in there. Wait a second. Actually, I already see that on August 2nd, we said we wanted to have a breakout. So I didn't hear it in the original listing, but anyway, August 2nd, we already did post in there. So anyway, we'll see what the schedule comes out, and if we're not there, we'll ask more. GitHub badge, Gabriel, I think you've been making progress on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, insofar as filing issues, but I was hoping to discuss whether we should start, making documentation PRs for that, and whether we should, like, where exactly we should document, what the badges shall look like and so forth. And I mean, we can even add like links to the documentation and just have people copy that, because it's fairly simple. Like we could even have like a code snippet that they can copy paste into their README.
Right.
We could also probably update the generator to generate the README with a badge, and maybe in our add-on documentation too.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Like where exactly we should do this. That would be my input, because then I'd PR it against that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The question is, the first question is, should this doc be in the Node core or in ABI stable node?
Well, we already have documentation introducing N-API in both Node core and in Node add-on API, and so it would make sense to elaborate on the introduction with that on the one hand, but because it's not much, it's just a paragraph, right? And then you just have the code snippets, and that's it. So I'm not sure if it warrants its own document.
Yeah, no, I mean, right. Okay. So just adding in, if it's a couple paragraphs, adding those into the existing N-API docs and core would make sense.
Yeah.
Add-on and Node add-on API for visibility as well.
Well, yeah. And I guess Node add-on API doesn't need its own set of badges because it is ultimately just an API.
Exactly. It's the same thing. It shouldn't matter to us, right?
Yeah. So it should be all right. And so Node add-on API could simply link to the core doc.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so that's pretty much the same setup that we had with the elaboration on ABI stability.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So I'll get started on that.
Okay, sounds good. The one I just added was we should start preparing for the workshop at NodeConf.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think there was one or two other examples that we maybe had talked about, or like
right.
Components.
Right. Yeah.
And the other one was, I think, Hitesh, the generator. It might be good if the generator had an option to generate something simpler.
Sure, I can update that.
Because I just remember when we went through, when I first went through, it's like, okay, this actually generates something which is more complicated than you need for a hello world.
It's really nice because it does show you how to like wrap an object.
Right. I'm not saying you don't want to do that too.
Yeah, but it would be nice if we could, if it could generate something that would just expose functions, because I think that's a very common use case.
Yeah.
Should that be the default?
I could almost see it when you run it, ask you which of the two you'd want.
Yeah, like I would say that for newcomers it shouldn't be too intimidating, right? Like we shouldn't start with object wrapping. That might be too intimidating.
That was just my thought. It's like, okay, this is very good, but it's got more code than you need for the very first hello world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And a generator for the very, very first hello world that gives you basically everything you need to call a function from JavaScript into a native C code.
Yeah.
Would be and that would be our first sort of then workshop thing, go through this. And that's like, now here's the more advanced one where now you want to bind the lifespan of the C code and the C++, the JavaScript code and the C++ code together. And the generator still helps you generate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actually, this also kind of leads into what we should do with the examples, right? So I don't know. Should I file an issue on Node.js admin asking them to reinstate the Node add-on examples repo?
I would, almost what we could do is say because the one that's there is archived, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I mean, I would say what we want to ask for is we want to replace that one with our ABI stable add-on examples.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it's a superset, right?
Well, the thing is, like, do we really want to keep showing examples that use V8? Or do we want to say, okay, that's it, we're doubling down and it's N-API henceforth, and so we will show N-API examples and none other,
Sometimes it's useful to show like multiple, right? But
okay.
I also think that it would be okay if we didn't show V8 examples in some cases. Like, I guess what I would want to say is we should also set the expectation that every example does not have to support all the different ways.
Okay.
Like, it should be perfectly fine for it to have just an API example.
And for thread safe function, both of them are an API only because there simply isn't any other equivalent.
Right. So we may want to update that. It says, make it clear that these will have, each example may show one or more of the ones. Like, we certainly don't want to backport like to NAND 12 or anything, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's another thing. Yeah. If we do reinstate that repo and we do start out with the contents as it is now, then we're going to have to do a bunch of cleanup because, things like, what is that? Like, things like handle, value instead of local value, those things, I think they're still there in that repo. And that's very, very old code. So besides adding N-API examples for everything, we would also have to clean up the V8 examples.
But aren't those V8 examples tied to a specific version of Node?
Well, yeah, that's another thing we would have to do is drop the ones that say Node 0.12 and stuff like that. So
would we have to drop them?
Could they be marked deprecated and linked to the recommended example?
Yeah, but either way, we'd have to make a decision on those, right?
So, but what's the harm of having them there? Like, each of them is built separately, right? So it's not that having them there stops you from building something else.
Well, okay, true, but since we are not testing them anymore, do they even work anymore? I mean, do we dredge up Node 0.12 and start testing them, or like, we're not supposed to support it?
No, I would not be doing anything like that. I would just be not removing them. Like, it's like there are examples that say you happen to have an old module that runs on 10, which still potentially exists. The ones where you have the three different examples doing the same thing kind of show you how you do the same
shows like a migration path.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess for those purposes, we could keep them around. Yeah, but we should at least put a big fat warning saying that these are no longer supported. They're there for historical reasons or whatever.
Yeah, I think like something up front that says, there may not be for each of the examples, there may or may not be implementations for the different flavors. Like, there's no guarantee there's anything other than there's an example for one of them, right? At least.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's no guarantees. Two, that you clarifying that some of the older ones are there to show potential migration, but we don't test or validate or use at your own risk kind of thing.
Okay. Now, will this not make the picture too complicated for people to even follow the examples?
Well, isn't it pretty easy though? You go in and you find an example. You go in and you pick. There's a subdirectory for an API
for each. Yeah.
And you go into the one that you want. So you only really need to look at one at a time.
Yeah, for one example at one implementation.
Right. So like it's already subdirectoried enough that if you're saying, oh, I'm using N-API C, I'll just go into this subdirectory. If I'm using Node add-on API, I'll go into this subdirectory.
Yeah.
If I'm using NAN, I go into this one. And if I want to compare, yeah, I might look at more than one, but otherwise it's pretty clear where you go.
Okay. All right. So then it sounds like we are reviving the repo, but then we still need the go ahead, right? From
Yeah, I basically I think what I would think we could ask for is to rename the old one and leave it archived, and then rename our ABI stable add-on examples to add-on examples.
Oh, okay, but it would simply be a continuation of it, right? Like, because it would have the same URL. It would be like
we've already got a repo which I think is a superset.
Yeah.
So basically, effectively, what we want to do is revive it, but revive it by renaming the one that we have been maintaining.
Yeah. I mean,
with a better name.
We can just commit that to the tip of Node add-on examples, I think, because it would just add a bunch of new directories, new files, new everything. Because I don't think we've touched the old ones. We've just added new ones, right?
Yeah. I'm just wondering what's easier. Like, is it easier just to do 2 repo remains or to do some sort of commit? Because you'll lose history doing that as well, right? Like you'll lose the history on the new one if you take it and commit it. Whereas if you rename the repos, we may end up maintaining the history.
Well, did ABI stable Node add-on examples? Does it have like well, I'll have to see if it has like a common trunk with Node add-on examples, because I mean, if the commit IDs are the same hash for hash up to a certain point, then ABI stable Node add-on examples is strictly ahead of Node add-on examples. Right. In which case there would be no issue with the history.
Yeah. Okay. So you could just basically pull all the commits, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if we unarchive it, then it would simply be a flurry of commits on top of what was already there.
Okay, and then we'd archive the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. As long as
Okay. So I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna check. Let me see. Okay. How to handle this? So now we know. So
yeah, just open a request in the admin repo to do
preserve
that. And
okay, open request in admin. Okie dokie.
Okay, that sounds good.
Michael, on that birds of a feather, it looks like they have scheduled us.
Yep.
Did you see that?
Yes, I saw that just recently they came out with the calendar for the day, and yes, I did check that we were in there somewhere. So
okay, so just so that you're aware that they scheduled us, the birds of a feather, immediately following your talk.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure that works for you.
Yeah, I think that works well, because we can basically say, hey, and if you want to talk more about it,
head on over,
right?
Yep, exactly. And so it looks like we'll have 30 minutes and then there'll be a break for lunch. So I think it works out really well.
That's good. I have one other, I assume, I haven't checked when my sessions are. I'm also on a security panel, but it's as long as that's not afterwards, it'd be fine. So, okay, that's good.
All right.
Okay, so I think that's what we've got on the go. Any other things we should talk about?
Yeah, I have one. I kept on looking at the Node add-on API to make sure that, holy cow, these guys, that's what you get for living next to a main street. So I was looking at Node add-on API some more to try to fix those memory leaks, and I may have another approach, which is to check that. Check what the native function is. So basically, you have the native function, you have the data, and then you associate, and then you create a JavaScript function out of that, right? And my problem was that if you have property descriptors, then you create the native data, and you store it in a structure. You pass the function pointer into the structure, and then you pass the structure. And so So at the point where you give the structure to an API, you don't know whether that structure was created by third-party code or whether that was created by Node add-on API itself. That was the issue. Yep. But I realized that you can distinguish because the function pointer stored inside the structure is a function pointer created by Node add-on API. So that part's good. But the problem is when you pass things into NAPI defined properties, the actual NAPI value, that is the JavaScript function, you never get back because it creates the NAPI value, but then it saves it as a property and then it discards the NAPI value because it's already saved as a property on the object, so you don't need to hold on to it anymore, right? And so even though I can distinguish the case where I need to do this wrapping to make sure that this data gets deleted from the case where I do not, and I can rely on the responsible module maintainer to do that, I don't have the function for the wrapping. I don't have the object onto which to attach this data because I never get it back. I would have to check all the properties, see which ones are functions, see what their names are, then look at the resulting object and grab the function from the object and then attach the data. So that's crazy. That makes the function really, really heavy. So my solution to that was to modify NAPI defined properties to save the NAPI value inside the structure after it creates it. So it goes NAPI create function that results in a NAPI value, which is a JavaScript function, and then you store that function back in the property descriptor. And then when NAPI defined properties returns, the property descriptor, whereas before it contained whatever, we don't care because we didn't look at the value, now it contains a NAPI value, which is the JavaScript function. So then as the next step, you can loop over the array of property descriptors again. And for each one that is a function, you would associate the data with the NAPI value if and only if the function pointer is internal to Node add-on API. But this, I asked this on IRC yesterday whether this constitutes an ABI break because whereas so far if you pass function pointers via a NAPI property descriptor, then we ignore the NAPI value that you also passed in because we don't care what it is. We take the function pointers and we turn them into a NAPI value. We weren't touching the actual value field, whereas now we would that particular item in the NAPI property descriptor array would no longer be input only; it would be input output now because we would be saving this newly created NAPI value and then returning it. So I'm not sure if that constitutes an ABI break. Like if you go from don't care to output, you know.
And because if people were, how would that break somebody? They were passing in something and it gets overwritten?
It would be overwritten. Exactly. It would be overwritten, but the value that would be overwritten would be a value that was documented as don't care in the case that function pointers are. Like the NAPI value is important if the property will have that value. But if the property is defined by the native function pointers, then whatever was stored in that field is irrelevant. So, and that's how it's documented. Because like I would love to have that because then I could take that NAPI value that I get back and immediately associate the data with it if the original function pointer were one that is interesting.
So but and that's a change. Sorry, that's a change to the C API or the Node add-on API?
The C API, yeah. We would have to change the implementation of NAPI defined properties to also save this value after it creates it.
Yeah, the challenge I see with that is then, you know, you can't make that change and depend on it unless you can get it all the way back into 6.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Right. So I don't, even if it's not breaking, I don't think it's something that we can, you know, we're basically adding a feature.
Yeah, you're right.
Back and backporting that because it's just a challenge.
Yeah, and there's another nail in the coffin, which is the fact that this works for functions, but it doesn't work for accessors because if you have accessors, you have two native function pointers, and then you call you call, like ultimately you end up calling a V8 object set accessor or whatever, or something like that. And you pass in the two function pointers, but you don't get back anything. You don't get back a value. Like when you create a function, you get back a value, which is a fully fledged JavaScript value. But when you set an accessor, you don't get back anything.
Right.
So I wouldn't even know with what to associate this data.
Right.
You know, like, do I, on the one hand, I could associate it with the object itself, because that makes sense from the point of view that you know, the accessor is inseparable from the object, whereas the function can be ripped off the object and used standalone. So I could associate with the object in the accessor case and with the function in the function. But if I don't get this, then doing this with no data on API would be really, really, really heavy.
Okay.
Because I would have to do another pass over the property descriptors afterward. And I would have to retrieve each function from the object. So, ugh.
Right. Now, in theory, yeah, I guess you'd have to go over the property descriptor to find out which ones are functions, right?
Yes, and then I would have to go over the JavaScript object and retrieve all those properties which are functions.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a JavaScript get for everything. So that goes into the VM, may throw exceptions, runs JavaScript code. It's very, very, very heavy.
This is when you're, but how often do you do this? How often do you do it for a given?
Yeah, it shouldn't be often, because most often you define things on a class. You don't define things on an instance.
Right.
So it should be all right. But I couldn't say, you know, without somebody complaining that this has ruined their use case.
Right.
So, you know, it's tough. But on the other hand, you have a clear memory leak. Like, there's no question about it.
Right. So, I mean, I wonder if it would be like for older versions, it does the heavy thing. And for newer versions, it uses the new function that we're adding.
What new function that we're adding?
I thought that we were adding the define, I forget what it was called, like add, it was like define reference or something.
Oh, wait, you mean the anonymous, the snappy app finalizer?
Yeah.
Oh,
Isn't that to help with this?
No, it doesn't help. That merely frees up the slots set aside for wrapping, and allows you to add any number of slots or to make use of any number of slots, as long as you don't try to then retrieve the value, the native value.
But again, I thought that was being driven by the fact that we needed to do this cleanup.
Yes, but this is another kind of this is another implication of it, which is orthogonal to this. Like, you know, ultimately, when I have my N-API value, which is the function, and I have my data, I have it both in my hands. Great. I can then use N-API wrap if I don't have this function, or I can use this function if it's already there. So that's fine. But in order to get the N-API value, that is the function with which to associate the data, I now have to do a property retrieval through JavaScript, because the property descriptor doesn't give me back the function in the end. It just sets the function on the object, and then it forgets about it. So that's another. So to even get the value that I then need to pass into either N-API wrap or N-API finalizer, I have to do some really heavy lifting.
Shouldn't it makes me wonder, like, we're already iterating over the property descriptor once, right?
Yes.
Why doesn't it just do what's needed in there?
Because the that which is doing it currently is already inside an API. So you pass it an array, and you pass it a bland object, and out comes a decorated object, and that's it. The functions which were added to the decorated objects do not come out except as attached to the object, and to be retrieved using a very heavy get property call.
But the functions were passed in the property descriptor, right?
No. The functions were passed in as native function pointers. N-API values were never passed in, which were JavaScript functions.
But within N-API, it created those somewhere, right?
It did, and it attached them to the object, and then it passes out the decorated object. So yes,
I guess I'm saying, while it's attaching to the object, would that be the right place to add the the
exactly,
thing that's
yes,
gonna clean them up.
and the place to save them would be the value field of the NAPI property descriptor. And then when the property descriptor array which you passed in comes back out, now all the ones which are functions, the value field becomes, well, useful instead of don't care, right?
But why do you need the value? Like I'm like, as opposed to trying to return the value field, actually just do what you need to do with the value field.
Because inside NAPI defined properties, we do not know that for this particular function, after you create the function, you must also associate the data with it, because NAPI defined properties is as low level as it gets from the point of view of the add-on. And so it certainly cannot distinguish between between the different function pointers that were passed into it. You know, it could be a function pointer coming from Node add-on API. It could be a function pointer coming from an add-on. It could be anything. So the point at which we can distinguish is inside the inline implementation in Node add-on API. That's the only place where we can distinguish, because we know we made that function pointer.
Yeah, I guess if we had another function, that took a hint that said this one.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Wrap these things when you create the function.
Right.
Yes, that would be, yeah. But okay, that's not so simple to implement either, because then each of those property descriptors could have its own finalizer, and so now you would have to pass in an array of finalizers. You know, for each property that is function valued that you attach, you wish to use this finalizer.
Yeah.
You know, which will be the same finalizer for all of them in 99.9% of the cases, but it's a degree of freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
So it gets really hairy at that point. So I don't know. I think for now I'll see what the code looks like with just doing another iteration over these things.
Yeah.
Over the property descriptors as they come out, and I'll do it the heavy way, and then we'll see just how heavy is.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And if it's for one-time class definitions, then okay, it'll fatten up the startup time a little bit, but otherwise it should be all right. So
right, because in theory you're going to create it once and then use it a whole bunch of times to create
Yeah. That's the theory. So as long as you're not creating functions on the fly like crazy, it should be all right.
Yeah.
And to be clear, if you're creating a single function, then this is not an issue. It's only when you're decorating objects on the fly.
So when you're adding a bunch of functions to an object.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guess today we have an option to do it separately, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you can NAPI create function and then NAPI set property or set named property even.
So if you really wanted to avoid the memory leak today, instead of taking the convenience of the property descriptor, you could do it that way.
Not with Node add-on API, because even creating a simple function in Node add-on API carries with it a memory leak today. But that's easy to fix and doesn't require any property access. So I got a solution for that, pretty easy to fix. And so
once we fix that, then you could, don't use the property descriptor.
Yeah, we could de-emphasize, except for defining a class, you have no choice because the prototype methods can only be done using NAPI defined class. They cannot be done in any other way.
Right. I mean, so I'd say, but at least if like there's a function you need to be fast.
Oh no, wait. I'm sorry. You're right. The only ones you can't do are the accessors right now.
Okay.
Those would have to be heavy because a function, you can either pass the native function pointers into the property descriptor, or you can pass a NAPI value into the property descriptor, right? And then it's already a NAPI value, meaning you previously called NAPI create function, meaning you did it the easy way.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think that, maybe we want a little bit of documentation. But anyway, I think that all votes for the do it the slow way.
Yes. Yeah.
And if it becomes a problem, there's at least some documentation we could add in terms of like, here's a way to work around that if it's causing you grief.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
And then it, and then well, at least we don't have a leak, which is good. And if when we've got some workarounds, if there's a performance issue.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that was the one thing that I had, and I think I have enough now to keep going with this, and hopefully get rid of the memory leaks real soon now.
Sounds very good. Okay. Anything else? Okay. If not, well, thanks for everybody for coming, and I guess so. Next week we will want to talk more about the async worker stuff. And I think we should also maybe, Jim, if you've had a bit of time to think about the workshop for NodeConf EU, we should maybe hopefully talk about that. Like, and if we need different people to do things, try and assign out action items, that kind of stuff.
Okay, sounds good, Michael.
Okay, great. Talk to you guys all next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.